Hey folks, Sarah here. I'm in the midst of exploring the wonderful books published by Milkweed Editions, and I thought I would come here and share my Milkweed TBR with you all. Milkweed is an independent nonprofit publisher of literary works of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. They do it all. Their driving vision is that literature has the power to change the way we see the world. And they enact that vision by publishing new, experimental, diverse voices and perspectives to contribute to what they call the literary ecosystem. And if you're familiar with any of Milkweed's books already, you'll know what they mean by that. One book in particular that has seen a huge increase in popularity recently is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which I read, actually got it from the library, so I don't have it here on my shelf, but it's a wonderful, wonderful example of the kind of incredibly powerful books that Milkweed publishes. So Milkweed itself is a flowering perennial that is most notable as the site where monarch butterflies lay their eggs. It's the host plant for monarch larvae, and importantly, it's actually the only place that monarchs will lay their eggs. They only lay their eggs on milkweed, and so it's an incredibly important plant. And as you can imagine, as habitats are being destroyed by people, there's been a lot of loss of milkweed and therefore loss of the site where monarchs can actually lay their eggs. It's actually the only plant that the monarch butterflies' caterpillars can eat. And so Milkweed Editions named their publishing venture after this plant because, as is the plant milkweed, a site of metamorphosis for the monarch butterfly, Milkweed Editions is a site of metamorphosis for writers and readers of literature. And so it's an incredibly important part of the literary ecosystem. So first up, we have the poetry collections of Ada Limon, the newly named Poet Laureate of the United States. And Ada Limon is a poet I adore. The first collection of hers that I bought was Bright Dead Things, which I have read and love. And so I also recently picked up her two other collections from Milkweed called The Caring and The Hurting Kind. So I can't wait to dive into those. And if you ever get a chance, check out any interview that Ada Limon does. Her relationship with the natural and animal world is so wonderful. It's really great to hear her speak about how she incorporates, but also hesitates to incorporate animal life in particular into her poetry, and how sometimes you just gotta let an animal be an animal. They're not there for you to write a poem about them. So I love her poetry, and I can't wait to dive in a little bit more this month. Next, we have a novel called The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. And I've actually already started this. I'm over halfway through. It's a really wonderful story about, it says on the back, a story of reawakening. The Seed Keeper follows a Dakota family's struggle to preserve their way of life and one woman's search for belonging and community. And it's one of those wonderful novels that is told in a couple different perspectives, but primarily is the perspective of a woman named Rosalie Ironwing. But her perspective is shared across time. So from her childhood and her young adulthood, and then her life as a young mother, and then as a woman who is recently widowed. There's also big jumps in time. We have a perspective way back in the 1800s, all the way up to 2002-ish, I think. And it's a really beautiful novel so far. I'm enjoying it. Then we have Haymaker in Heaven, a novel by Edvard Huem. And this is translated from the Norwegian by Tara Chase. And this is, and on the back it says that he's one of Norway's leading writers and has been translated into English for the very first time here. And it's a transatlantic novel of dreams, sacrifice, and transformation set at the turn of the 20th century. And I believe it's set in both Norway and in the United States, and is one of those sprawling family sagas, which is always a good choice. Then we have a few poetry collections, and I find it really difficult to describe poetry collections before I've read them. So I'm going to zoom through them pretty quick. First up, we have the Stone Garland, and these are 6 poets from the Greek lyric tradition. So these are ancient Greek poets and poetry translated by Dan Beachy Quick. And I picked this up because it's one of Milkweed's seed bank series. And just like a seed bank is somewhere where you store seeds for future generations so that they have access to seeds and food if they need it, the seed bank series is Milkweed taking mostly books that are ancient literature, translated literature, but also it seems like some newer works as well, and producing this seed bank series so that future generations have access to these wonderful works. And so I picked this one up as my first dipping my toe into the seed bank series. Then we have Maps and Transcripts of the Ordinary World. These are poems by Catherine Cowles. And what's really wonderful, other than the amazing cover, about this collection is it includes images along with the text. And Mary Ruefle, the poet Mary Ruefle, says about the collection, "Where are you? Where do you think you are? How do you know? Maps and transcripts of the ordinary world will quite possibly change your mind, or that part of your mind that thinks it knows or relies on anything in print." Then we have Bluest Nude by Ama Kojo. And this is a brand new collection, just published within the past couple of weeks. And it is blurbed by both Tracy K. Smith, the former poet laureate, and Ada Limon, the newly named poet laureate of the United States. And it just sounds really fantastic. I am not going to attempt to describe it much. Oh, look at all the white space. Look at that. I love that. I love white space in a poetry collection. Tracy Smith's blurb says, "How beautifully seen, tended, and rendered are our many black lives under this poet's exquisite gaze. In appetite and loss, rage and praise, what animates these poems is a profound cherishing, an abiding, and yet at every turn surprising, love rushing out from the lush wilderness of Ama Kojo's rapturous imagination. Bluest Nude is an ecstatic encounter." Then we have Vapor, poems by Sarah Eliza Johnson. Let's admire. Since so much about poetry is how it looks on the page, unless you're hearing it read, and then it's a completely different experience. And I love Dana Levin's quote on the back. Sarah Eliza Johnson's Vapor is bracing, exhilarating, and mind-blowing. Lush description meets scientific precision in these poems, as do tenderness and blade, in settings and situations as vast and violent as the combustions that power stars. Then we have another novel called Perma Red by Deborah Magpie Erling. And this was a winner of the American Book Award and winner of the Western Writers of America Spur Award for Best Novel. And it's about Louise, a character, Louise White Elk, who has grown up in the harsh landscape of vast distances, family separations, and boarding schools. And as she approaches adulthood, Louise hopes to create an independent life for herself and better future for her family, but 3 persistent men have other plans. And I believe this author has another novel coming out soon, or maybe in the spring, from Milkweed as well, which is exciting. Then we have The Shame by McKenna Goodman. And this is a novel, I believe, about a woman who lives in Vermont with her family, and her husband goes off to work every day, and she and her family kind of live close to the land, and she is stuck at home raising her young kids, and then one night decides to up and leave and head to New York. And I believe the novel is told in a series of flashbacks of like what circumstances led to that decision of her deciding to up and leave. And so I like the length of it. It's nice, should be a nice slim read. My family and I ventured to the Montrose Bird Sanctuary recently to see if we could spot any monarchs, and it's actually right around this time of year is when monarchs do have their mass southern migration, and you can actually find them quite often along Lake Michigan. So Montrose Bird Sanctuary is right at the lake. So we went there and looked around, and sure enough, we did find a few. Then we have World of Wonders by Amy Nezuka Matatil. And you may have seen this one around. It is so beautiful. I've seen it a lot of places, in a lot of bookstores, and a lot of best of lists. So this is a book, how to describe this? I guess it's a book of like essays or like little like short lyrical pieces that are each based around an animal or a plant. And the author talks about the characteristics of the particular animal or plant, and then relates it back to her own life and her childhood and her journey as a poet. That's how I understand it. But we'll see. I am so excited. I flipped through this with my son to take a look at all the beautiful illustrations. So, the superb bird of paradise. Then we have Graceland at Last, Notes on Hope and Heartache from the American South by Margaret Renkel. And she has had a couple books come out with Milkweed, including a book called Late Migrations, which got a lot of really great press, as did this book. So this is a book of essays on the author's relationship with the South. And it's supposed to be really beautiful. So I picked it up from the library. And then finally, we're ending on, for now at least, a brand new book just published by Milkweed called Sinkhole by Juliet Patterson. And this is a memoir, and it sounds like it's a pretty intense memoir. It certainly is a difficult and traumatic subject. The author, Juliet Patterson, is exploring in Sinkhole her family's history with suicide, and she has multiple members of her family on both sides of her family who committed suicide. And so through this memoir, she's exploring her family history and what it is about her family that has led to this destructive and horrible and deadly pattern. It sounded very bleak, but also really fascinating. So I picked it up from the library since it just came out, and looking forward to reading that one as well. I do have a couple, not that I think that I'm going to actually be able to read all of these books this fall, especially since over here I have my spooky preview of my spooky season selections for myself for October. Little preview shot of that. So I don't know or think I can get through all of these books this fall. And I have more waiting for me or on their way from the library from Milkweed. But please go check out Milkweed's website. Their catalog is clearly irresistible. It is hard to not add every single book to your cart. I am really excited that my Milkweed, I got these two from the library, which is a wonderful resource, but I'm so excited to see my Milkweed library continue to grow. I can't wait to come back and share with you a little more about each of these wonderful books. So if you've read anything from Milkweed, please share in the comments below. If you have other recommendations of other independent presses that you've been reading recently, please also feel free to share that. I would love to hear more. So I think I'm gonna go maybe read a book, maybe have a snack. Mom, since you're probably the only one watching still, thank you for watching. I love you, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.